Hey, can you tell the difference between these two websites? Well, let me help you by opening the source code for each one of them and taking a look at them. The left one is what is called a modern JavaScript app. And if I come down here, you see that, let me see. Yeah, it's built with Next.js and React. This is actually what client receives when they visit the website. The right one is a simple HTML and CSS website, and I only used htmx here to replace some of the API calls and replace some HTML elements on the website. So if I come here, they basically look identical and they behave the same. So why did I decide to go from Next.js to a simple HTML and CSS website? And why did I chose htmx to help me with that? Well, in this video, I'm going to explain all of this, and also we are going to take a look at the code and how this new HTML and CSS website using htmx is built and what was before. And also after that, I'm going to give my overall thoughts on htmx and this whole process of moving from Next.js to a simpler website. So stay tuned. Before we jump into the refactoring process, let's get ourselves familiar with the app. So Cut is a free URL shortener that is built with Node and Express on the backend, React and Next.js for the front end, some state management library, a styling library, Postgres for the database, and Redis for the cache layer. And what you currently see on the develop branch is the Next.js version, and the htmx version is on the v3 branch, but this will change in future. And to show you the website again, we basically have a form to put the long URL and select some options for this long URL and submit the form and receive a short link. And we can view our created links here, and we can, for example, see the QR code, edit the link, delete it, and stuff like that. So come along with me to view the source code and start the app. And if you walk in my shoes, perhaps you would see the incentive to move away from Next.js and my reasoning on why I chose a plain HTML and CSS website over any other JavaScript frameworks. This is the code for the Next.js version, where everything related to Next.js and front end is living inside the client folder, and everything related to the server side is inside the server folder. And we have all these files here. Lovely, isn't it? To start the app, we obviously first need to install the dependencies. So I go ahead and do that. And as you can see, there is some conflict here. One of the libraries needs React 17, the other needs another version. And there is some stuff here. So I'm going to, for now, do a force install to bypass this issue. And let's see. Oh, another error. Okay, this one seems like a library which is re2 is trying to build something, but it can't. So since I can live without this library, I'm going to remove it for now, just to be able to start this project. So I'm going to install again. Oh, another error. Okay, it's a permission error for ASCII, and I don't need that too. I just want to start the project. So npm install again, and hopefully we get it this time. Oh, amazing. We have installed the packages, but look at this. 35 vulnerabilities. 2 low, 20 high, and 2 critical. Now, here's the issue. I already know that some of them at least are for Next.js. And it would have been fine if there was a patched version that I could update to, but that's not the case. So if I come here and search for Next.js, and let's just open one of them. For example, this one. You can see that from version 10 to 12, this vulnerability was not fixed. So if someone wants to fix this vulnerability, they have to upgrade from version 10 to 12. And the same is true for me now too. So to fix this issue, I have to upgrade my Next.js app to something like 14 or whatever the latest version is. And the thing is, if I upgrade, now I have to come here and just refactor my code because the API has changed. And this is only Next.js. Now that I have upgraded my Next.js, I now have to upgrade my React. Now I have to upgrade every library that depends on React. Now the other library has changed its API. So basically I have to refactor my whole app just to be able to work on whatever I was going to work on, or just simply to just start my app. This is not a one-time thing. I have created Cut, I think over 7 years ago, and I come back to work on this project maybe once or twice a year to address some issues, pull requests, and stuff like that. And what did I just show you basically happened every time, and that's what I had to deal with again and again. In fact, in 2022, I wrote a post about this on my blog, which if you're interested, you can go ahead and read. So at some point, I just looked at my list of dependencies and thought how I rely on all these packages to just work with no issues, with no bugs, and how I put my trust on all of these to be safe and to be secure and to just work nicely with each other. But that's not the case, unfortunately. And I'm not trying to bash any open source libraries because I know how it's hard to maintain an open source project. But that's just the fact that we have to deal with. It's basically a chain. First, you choose React to build your app with. Then you choose a styling library. Then you search around for how to deal with forms, and they suggest you to choose this library or that one. So basically, over time, you come back to your project and see how the list of dependencies has grown bigger and bigger. And you're not the one to blame. It's how the whole front-end community has been shaped over the years around installing and importing packages and libraries. One more thing I wanted to talk about before bringing up htmx is how what I get at the end is very much different from what I have written at the start, and how I need to build and transform my code before shipping it to the production. And that's also true for the development stage, because I need to compile all these TypeScript stuff to JavaScript for the browser, and also transpile all this JSX stuff to something that browser can parse and understand. And the cherry on top is the styles that are in JavaScript and also need to be converted to CSS styles. So all these steps between me and what I get in the browser are not only slowing down the the whole development process, but also make the debugging and understanding the code harder. So if I check what is actually shipped to the client's browser, I can see that it's hard to read and understand what is exactly happening in these JavaScript files. In fact, the original code I've written has changed so much that I don't even know who I am anymore. So I thought to myself, if I'm writing for the browser, then why don't I directly write for the browser and skip everything that is between me and the browser, cut the middleman, you know. Also, it got me wondered, what am I doing on my website that is so complex that I need the help of all those frameworks and libraries and all that awkward development experience. So I wanted to go in a new direction and try something different. And I already knew about htmx, which is an extension to HTML, and add some attributes to it that help you with making requests and updating your HTML elements. So I decided to give it a try and see how it goes. I think to best understand what htmx is and what it does is to start off with an example and also compare it to the React version of the app that I have. So I have the React version here, and if I inspect elements, you can see that I have a form which is a React component, and its state is controlled by JavaScript, and I have an input which its value is controlled with JavaScript, and every time I type something, JavaScript is going to intercept the values, read them, and then assign the values manually to this input. And if we view the code, you can see that this is the typical React app where we import our React dependencies, then we import our React components. Here I create the styles, and I have the states here. Then down here we have our form component, our text input, which is controlled with JavaScript, and we have the submit handler, which handles the submit, and inside it is going to set some states, and here it's going to actually make the request. It's going to receive the response and set some state based on that response. And finally, if there is a response, it's going to create a component to show the link. So if I actually come here and make the request, you can see that the response is a JSON, and the React app is going to process this JSON and show the link here. Now I switch to the htmx version of the app, and if I inspect elements, you can see that I have the same form here, but the difference is this one is a purely a static HTML form. What that means is that I have my HTML template here, and I'm sending it directly to the user. So whatever you see here is exactly what you get here in your browser. What that also means is that if I come here and disable JavaScript and submit the form, it's going to work. Now, show me a so-called modern JavaScript app that works without JavaScript. Go ahead, just name one. I'm waiting. I would have waited more, but I have to continue making the video. I'm going to disable JavaScript and show you what actually htmx does. So if I come here, you can see that I have loaded the JavaScript, the htmx library here, and what it does is it's going to go through my HTML and look for elements that have these custom htmx attributes. Now htmx is going to make the same request but without loading a whole new page. So basically it's an AJAX request, just like how in the old days we would use libraries like jQuery to make asynchronous requests. So if I submit the form now, you can see that the response is also HTML. So what htmx does is it grabs this HTML from the response and puts it here in my web page. That's cool, but how does it work? Well, it's all done by the htmx attributes that I have added to my form here. With the post attribute, I'm saying that make a request to API/links when I submit this form. And with the target attribute, I'm saying that find the closest main element, which is this one, and replace it with whatever is received from the server as the response. And with the swap attribute, I'm saying how to swap this element, and outer HTML means that swap the element itself and not the content inside of it. So if I submit this form again, you can see that the main element is replaced with whatever is received from the server. But since the response here is almost identical to the one that I had, you didn't notice a change. So only the value for the link is changed. And since the attributes are exactly the same, this creates some kind of loop where I can keep submitting my form without changing its behavior or its appearance. Now, the beauty of serving a static HTML and JavaScript is that I can edit my values here right in my browser and see the effect here without needing to go back to my code editor and making any changes here in my code, because they are exactly the same. So if I change it to inner HTML and submit the form again, you can see that now the content of my target element here is swapped with the response. And if I change it to something else that htmx supports, for example after end, it's no longer is going to swap, but rather it's going to put it right next to my target element. So this is basically how htmx works, and this is what it does. htmx helps you make asynchronous requests to RESTful APIs and replace or add content on your web page. But of course there is more. Like how do you handle, let's say, form validation, or how do you do authentication, or how do you do complex UI, or how do you do animations, how do you do charts. I'll get into them one by one, but before that, let's recap our comparison between the htmx app and the React.js app. To run and start my Next.js project, I need to compile and transpile my code. And the browser also needs to um, load and decompress all these JS files and read them before print anything on the screen, so user can interact with them. And even if I server-side render some of the things, I still need to build my code, and that itself follows its own set of complexities. For the htmx app, I'm not building anything because I'm sending whatever HTML I have directly to the user. So all I do here is just start my Node.js server. In fact, my server can be anything. It can be Go, Rust, whatever you like, because all I'm doing here is rendering my HTML template. And I'm using a template engine to split my HTML into several files so it can be easier to manage what I have. But at the end, it's going to be sent as one whole HTML file to the user. On the other hand, my Next.js app is coupled with JavaScript. So I cannot really use something else unless, well, I use two different backends, because at the end, even if I only build my project with Next.js, I still need to write some server-side JavaScript to decide what to render on my web page. I'm also using JavaScript to create my styles. So it's going to be dynamically assigned to each element. Now, will these styles in my JavaScript app going to work 6 months from now, 1 year from now? Does the API for style components is going to change? Will it be compatible with the new Next.js app? Well, I don't know. On the other hand, for my htmx app, I have one simple style CSS file, which is being sent to the browser directly. Now, this CSS file has been supported by the browsers for the last 20 years, and it will be forever. So, I mean, not forever, but as long as the sun is shining and humans are alive and nothing bad has happened, this styles.css file is going to work. In my Next.js app, I have local and global states. I use states to detect if user is authenticated. I use states to show messages, to set loading. I even use states to control the form. I also have other type of JavaScript logic like form validation, where I use JavaScript to validate my form, or also even use JavaScript to detect if some kind of feature is enabled on my website or not. And if I make a request, what I get from the server is raw data. So I also use JavaScript to process this request and decide what to do and what to render on my web page. And also, I have this list of dependencies which my app depends on them to work. In my htmx app, I don't have that sort of JavaScript logic on my front end. So how do I achieve the same thing with htmx on my website? Let me focus on my htmx app. Let's start with the simple ones first. For example, the loading spinner that I get here when I submit the form. So this one is basically done by CSS. If you look closely here, when I submit the form, htmx is adding this extra class which I use to let's see if I find that. Yeah, to display this spinner that I have here. There is also this checkbox which shows some extra options, and I have only written one single inline JavaScript to toggle the switch for this one. Notice that I don't change or control the value for the checkbox itself. That's again all done by the browser. I'm only toggling some class here to hide or display content. Let's move on to form validation. The browser itself has some validation that gives early feedback to the user, but the main validation I do is not on the front end, and it's completely being processed on the back end. So how does this work is I have a set of validators on my server which are going to validate the values, and if there is an error here in my form element, I check if there is an error, and I show this extra paragraph for the error, and I also set some class to change the style. So if I check here, you can see that I have my error and I have my error class. And let's say if I make it valid, now you no longer see them. The same is true for all the forms that I have on my website. So if I put something invalid, I validate and show errors the same way. And I like this because now I have one source of truth. So if I come here and let's say, for example, I want to change the URL regex, I only need to change it in one place, and I don't need to apply the change also on the front end. So all the logic is on my back end and my front end is dumb. And this is good because in future, if I wanted to do a sanity check, I wouldn't need to check two places. There is only one place to check for validations, calculations, or whatever is the main logic that I'm doing. This logic on the backend is not only for validations. Sometimes you want to decide what to show to the user and what to hide, or based on the features that are enabled for the user, you want to allow some things and disallow the other. So let's say I want to disable sign up. In my server, I have this configuration to disallow registration. So I set it to true, and what I do is pass the configurations that I want to my template engine. And now in my form component, form template. Some habits, I guess, take some time to change. In my form template, I check if registration is enabled or not, and then show this element to the user. Now the difference between this and for example my React app is that I'm not sending this information to the front end and let the front end to decide what to do with that information. This is happening completely on my server and before it gets even to the user's browser. So I'll here restart my server, and sign up is gone. It's not even being sent from the server. Now for the authentication, I set HTTP only cookies on my browser, but I do it right from my server and I don't do anything here on the front end. So if I check my authentication handler, you can see that I'm setting the token within the response. So I set and delete tokens right within the response itself. Now this one is interesting because I have all these interactions here that I try to do with as minimal JavaScript as possible. And also tables are a bit tricky to handle with htmx, and as you can see here, I have a lot of htmx attributes to make sure that this one works as smoothly as possible. You have already seen some of these attributes, like making a GET request, specifying the target element, and saying how to swap this element. The trigger one here is interesting because there are multiple events that trigger the request for this table. Load once means make the request once the element is loaded on the DOM. Now, why didn't I fetch the links before user opens a web page and send them along everything else to the user? That's because if I open the production version here, you can see that getting the links could be quite slow. Now, users shouldn't wait for these links to be fetched before they can use the form and create a new short link, which is the main functionality of this app. The other one is also interesting. It's listening to the reload links event from the body element. But when does this happen? If I create a link here, you can see that it makes the table to reload the links, and that's because if I come here, you can see that with the response header I am sending back this htmx header with the value reload links, which then htmx assigns it to the body element, and I can listen to it here. This one means when an input with the name all is changed, which is this checkbox here. And this one means when I click on any button that has the class nav, and that targets these ones here. So when the input that has the name search is changed, which is this one here. Now all of these can work together, but how is that possible? Because I don't have states. So how does my table know what to send? This is achieved by the hidden inputs that I have here. So here I'm saying that include anything from links controls, which is this element here, and inside it I have all these inputs that when I change, for example, anything here from the nav, it's going to set the value for the respective input here. And my table element is going to include those when it makes a request. Then I also have hx sync, which is also interesting because let me open the production app again, and let me inspect the elements, and let's say I type soft, then with the delay where, oh, this didn't work, too fast. Yeah, so when I have multiple requests, it's going to make sure only the last one gets resolved, and it's going to cancel the other ones. This is nice because, for example, if the first one gets resolved after the first one, I'm going to see the wrong data here. Even if it gets resolved just right before the new one, I'm going to see like a flash of content here. And after all that, when the content for the table is loaded, I'm going to update the navigation, because let's say I'm on the next page and I search something, and now I have to make sure what I show as available to the user is correct. So I have written custom JavaScript for that. It's somewhere. It's one of those areas that I needed to write just some custom JavaScript to make it work. Moving on to the interactions that I have with my table rows here, I have this edit button, and it displays a form to edit my row. And this is different from a typical React app, because in a React app you already have this loaded. But in htmx, if you take a look here, this is an empty row, and when I click on edit button, I request a form from the server and then put it there. And just like the other forms, if I, let's say, update it, I get the form back as the response, so I can show the message here. But if you also notice, the row itself is updated without the whole table being reloaded. Let me change this one perhaps. And you see now that this one is updated, but without reloading the whole table. In my response, I'm sending the form back, but what I also send is this row inside a template. And perhaps you would have expected that a new this row would be added somewhere here, but since I have this out of bound swap set to true, it's going to take this ID and look for it inside my HTML document and replace it with the element that has the same ID. And since my row has this ID, it's going to be swapped with that one. For example, look at this one that hasn't been swapped yet. And if I do edit and update it, it's now going to be swapped with the new row received from the server. Now we have these models here, which are also a bit tricky to handle with Next.js, because with a React app you could have just had the content ready and toggle something to show it. But with htmx I have where is it? Yeah, this empty model ready, and again when I click on it, I'm going to request for the content from the server and then show it here. Deleting the row itself is simple. I just have this delete attribute, and I set the swap to none, because when there is an error, I just want to append the error message. But when there is a success, I control it with this header in the response to replace the whole thing. I also again use the reload rings trigger to reload the table when I delete a link. The QR code is actually one of those areas where I used an external library to do the job for me instead of writing it from scratch my own. As you can see, this is the only library other than htmx that I have used. Actually, there is one more. For the charts, I also used a library to handle this for me. So it has nothing to do with htmx. It's the chart.js library that I used. And if I open my main.js file, you can see that most of what I have written is to create these charts using the chart.js library. There is also this map, which is basically an SVG, and I used also custom JavaScript here to fit the map data, and also my own JavaScript to create the tooltips. There is also the setting page, but there isn't something that I haven't already talked about. So but if you are interested, you can check the code on GitHub and read exactly what I have done. It's on the version 3 branch, and in future, if there is no version 3 branch, just check the develop branch. So after all, How was htmx? What do I think of it after doing all this refactoring and coming from the Next.js and the React world? HTMX made me think differently about web development and reminded me that web development doesn't need to be complex. There's something nice about working with plain HTML and CSS and sending and receiving HTML and treating the HTML itself as the data. I also liked how I got rid of all those things that stood between me and the browser. And I found my development experience much more enjoyable. But who benefited the most are, I think, the users, since they don't need to load dozens of JavaScript files so they can interact with my website. Just look at the data transferred for my htmx app, and it's only around 100 kilobytes, and my largest file is my font. I also found some parts of my website to be much more faster where I didn't exactly expect that. This fetching the links used to take seconds in my Next.js app. I'm exactly not sure how this got a lot faster. Maybe there is less pressure on my server because there is no Next.js. I'm not sure. And at the end of the day, I sleep peacefully at night because I know I have used some solid technology that is going to work for times to come. However, using HTMX wasn't without concerns. HTMX made me also think differently about user interactions and user interfaces, and I'm not sure if for the best. With HTMX, I didn't have the freedom I had with React in creating user interactions on frontend. And I wondered if I wasn't refactoring from my old app to new app and I was starting from scratch with HTMX, would I still design my website like this? Because there were moments where I found it too much hassle to do some of the interactions with HTMX, and I wish that I could have done them differently. So I got worried that HTMX might kill my creativity. Although as time went on, I got more comfortable with HTMX in implementing some of these interactions. But this feeling that you get with HTMX that it's like limiting your creativity is undeniable. One more thing I wanted to talk about is about sending and receiving HTML. Now, it worked fine for me because I was a single person and I handled both backend and frontend. But if you're in a team that frontend and backend is handled by different people, or even if your backend is completely handled by a separate team where you're not exactly in close collaboration with, then you need some kind of plan or strategy to provide the template that you have and get the HTML content that exactly you want. If this was, for example, JSON, it would have been a lot easier because the backend could have just sent the data and you yourself would have decided what to do with that. On the note for API calls, notice that in my local host, how the size of the transferred HTML file is huge. Now, when I first saw this, I thought, oh, I have to now go use images for the inline SVGs I used and do not repeat myself and extract all these repeating checks attributes and move them maybe to the parent and do not repeat myself. But then I remembered that in production, I actually compress the files with JZEP. So I checked the production version and I saw that indeed it's being compressed, and it's being compressed a lot because most of the things that I'm sending are repeating themselves and they can be easily compressed to a much smaller version. So be mindful about this when you design your HTML templates, and also make sure that you're compressing them when you're shipping them to the user. Also, one more thing to be careful about is, let me go back to the localhost, is with user controlled inputs like this one, where they can perform an XSS attack. So when I submit this, it's nothing is going to happen because the template engine that I'm using is going to escape that string. But if I purposefully do not escape what user has entered and come here and refresh my page, you can see that, yep, they can execute JavaScript on my website. So now you have to be extremely careful on escaping your user controlled input since you are sending and receiving HTML. And finally, htmx wasn't exactly that easy to use. I mean, it wasn't hard, but it wasn't easy either. There were moments when I thought I could have done this with vanilla JavaScript much quicker. But now I have to sit down and figure out how to do it with htmx. But I guess that's true for every other library or framework. Also, they have a book. And I thought, do I really need to read a book to understand how to use a simple library? And is this an ideology or cult that I have to hop on before I can use htmx? Because if yes, then count me in. No, I'm joking. Actually, I love to read books and I love to read this one, but I don't think I can get it shipped to my country, and I don't want to read the online version because I love my eyes. Also, there were a lot of discussions regarding these hypermedia driven applications and how it's going to save the web and such. And I thought, are they having a severe complex? But then I looked at the memes here and I was relieved because I guess that balances them out. Speaking of memes, they have very good essays that I recommend you to read even if you are not interested in using htmx itself. So, final opinion. I liked htmx and I think it's a step in the right direction, and I would continue use it in future. I just hope they don't change a lot. I hope they stay a small cute JavaScript library. I mean, not cute, but small library.